Hello folks, I'm Dan, the editor of Wargames Illustrated magazine, the world's premier tabletop gaming magazine, and I'd like to take you on a tour of the latest issue. That is Wi408, the December 2021 issue of the magazine. Now the first thing to point out before we get into the papery thing is the plasticky things stuck to the cover. So you're either going to get one of two marvellous free gifts with this issue of the magazine. You're either going to get French Napoleonic Epic Heavy Cavalry, or you're going to get British Napoleonic Epic Cavalry. These come courtesy of Warlord Games, and whichever one you get, you're definitely going to get some bases with it as well. So have a route round in the shop, pick whichever one you want. They're randomly packed. You'll get British or you'll get French. Either way, they're going to be fantastic. These are the first time these have been seen anywhere. You can't buy these anywhere at the moment. So get your hands on them, touch them, feel them, paint them, get them on the tabletop as quickly as you can. So there you go. Don't miss out on those free gifts with this issue of Wargames Illustrated magazine. Right, inside the magazine itself, the first thing I want to point out to you is an important announcement from the editor. So it's a statement there talking about what we're doing with overseas subscriptions at the minute and how that is changing slightly, and how unfortunately going forward we're not able to put the free gifts on the cover of the magazine because things have changed in such a way that it makes it totally impossible, totally impractical price-wise to be able to give away the free gifts on the cover of the magazine with sub-copies that are going abroad. There's a statement about that online as well, so read all about it. Now once we get past that, we get to the first article in the magazine, which is Quickfire, one of our regular features in which wargamers, just like you, tell us about projects they've been working on over the last few weeks, or things that they've noticed within the hobby, or in this case, something that's been uncovered by a friend of the magazine, Paul Sully from Tumbling Dice has uncovered a John Blanche chariot, and he tells you all about that. I won't spoil it by telling you any further. Okay, next up we've got Observation Post. This is new and forthcoming wargame stuff you need to know about. So as usual, we're looking at new releases in the hobby, telling you a bit about the figures that we've spotted, or rules or whatever that we've spotted that have been released recently. It's worth noting that we've changed the look of Observation Post a bit. In some of the features we've gone into a bit more detail. So for example, in this case, in this tricorn figure, a 40mm figure, we've painted it up, and Mark Arenas Painters told you a bit about how he painted it and some tips on doing the same yourself. I hope you're liking that more in-depth look to Observation Post. Next up, another regular feature, Release Radar. So our radio operative, Dom Saw, looks at some more obscure releases in the hobby, things that may have not been the most obvious things that you may not have seen that have been released, but what he likes and he thinks you should know about. Having said that, one of the things he does look about is probably one of the most obvious releases recently, and it's the Bolt Action campaign book, Italy Soft Underbelly. So he's as a Bolt Action player, he tells you a bit about what he thinks about that new book, and also goes on to look at the new figure releases in support of it. They're both from Warlord Games and Wargames Atlantic as well. So new World War II Italians from both of those companies. So happy days for World War II Italian fans. Our next feature is Full Paper Jacket, in which Neil Smith looks at new book releases that you should know about. Before we get into the first of the theme articles, now our theme for this month is Napoleonic Big Battles. So led by the epic frames that we're giving away with the magazine, we're looking at Big Battles Napoleonic. And in this article, which is called Waterloo Goes Epic, we speak to both John Stallard and Paul Sawyer from Warlord Games, who tell us a bit about the background to Waterloo, the Waterloo campaign, as they're calling it, their epic campaign, where the figures came from and where the whole range is heading to as well. We also have a quick look at some black powder 28mm figures that are not yet released. So that's the inside track on the Waterloo campaign series. Next up, we switch away from Napoleonic to World War II, and Gaz Walsh looks at kit bashing some figures. He takes 5 frames and he kit bashes them into 7 different figures, more sort of obscure British soldiers for World War II. So if you like a bit of kit bashing, Gaz tells you how he made the figures, these 7 different figures featured in the article. Next up, More plastic shenanigans with our cover mount focus, in which our in-house painter Mark looks at painting the Napoleonic heavy cavalry. In the in-magazine article, he's looking at the British heavy cavalry. Online, he's looking at the French, and he tells you how to paint them up to intermediate or advanced level in just the same way he did. Get them looking smart and tabletop ready. Let's skip past the next couple of adverts and get to the Silver Bayonet Society Part 2. So this is the second time we've featured the Silver Bayonet rules in the magazine, and going forward we've got a couple more features on them as well. In this article, James from WI looks at his first game of Silver Bayonets, talks about his first game, and going forward what we're going to do in our in-house campaign. In front of your very eyes here, you can see actually the table that's left from last night's gaming, in which we played Silver Bayonets with the official North Star figures, etc. So yeah, we've started our Silver Bayonet campaign, and James tells you a bit about how that's going as our second part of the Silver Bayonet Society. Go big or go home. That's what Sam Mustafa says in the next article in the magazine. Now, Sam's a rather marvellous US games designer. He's written loads of games, and he shares some of his experience in writing Napoleonic rules and playing Napoleonic games, which he's been doing for the last 50 years. So he does know what he's talking about. Read all about it in Go Big or Go Home. Our next article, a non-themed show report, kind of. In fact, we're just really focusing on one particular game. It's the best of show game from the recent Partisan Wargames show, and it's an interview with Graham Hilditch, who's the man who created this 7 Years' War 40mm game. He tells us how the board came together and what's going on the tabletop, taking a bit of a tour of the board. Really lovely looking game, deserved winner, and it's nice to get the inside track on what that game was all about. Next up, more Napoleonics. This time we're switching manufacturer and going over to Bicorn. And Paul McKay talks about painting up his Napoleonic personalities, Bicorn Napoleonic personalities, and what colours he put where on the metal to make them look smart. And then for something completely different, a journey into the apocalypse. We've got Terrace Cassidy of Geek Nation Tours. He's taking us into the wastelands, or desert as it were, in America, and he takes a copy of Gaslands with him. That's Osprey Games' madcap car warfare game set in a post-apocalyptic world. He takes the rules with him and he plays against Lord Humongous, amongst other people out in the desert. So he reports on how his gaming went and what a weird kind of gaming experience that was. It's really interesting to read all about it. Now, next up, it's hip to form square. Pete Brown takes a look at Napoleonic squares, both in reality and in history. So that famous infantry formation used to keep the cavalry at bay. Pete tells us all about it and the pros and cons of using it on the tabletop and in history. The next article is systematic Stargrave speed painting. Our in-house painter Mark painted up 12 Stargrave figures in 12 hours, and they look marvellous as well, so he wasn't skimping on the quality. He tells you all about how he did that using his trusty airbrush. It's kind of a follow-on from last issue's article about the introduction to using the airbrush. So Mark tells you how you can use the airbrush to paint up some great looking 28mm figures. We're not talking tanks, we're not talking aircraft or anything like that. We're talking about figures and how he painted them up fast using the airbrush and got them looking marvellous. Right, softening up Napoleonic artillery in combat is the next article from Neil Smith and Jim Graham. They're looking at artillery in the Napoleonic period, and it's a sort of beginner's guide to artillery, really. You'll find all about it in this article, and you'll also find loads of lovely photos by Alan Perry, who supplied us with some great pictures of Perry Miniatures artillery, which is great to see. Next up, adverts from people you should buy stuff from. And finishing actually with an advert for Gripping Beast, who've now taken on the front rank figurine range as well, so that's interesting. Right, there you have it. That is the December 2021 issue of Wargames Illustrated magazine. It is probably out now, and it comes with one of these two frames. Make sure you don't miss out on getting hold of a Warlord Games epic Napoleonic heavy cavalry frame. There you go. Wi408. Thank you very much. Goodbye. This video has been brought to you by WI Prime, Wargames Illustrated magazine's online members club. View more videos or find out more about WI Prime by following these links.